Hey everybody, welcome to Die Heroic, and this is Pop Culture Clash. Today with me we have Mac Jackson and Dan Cheek. Should be with me for the next couple episodes, talking about stuff. So today we're going to talk about what the biggest differences are between Marvel and DC. Now, obviously, this goes beyond things like characters. DC has Superman and Batman. Marvel has Spider-Man and Wolverine. Okay, big deal. As far as storytelling concepts and things that they do, what are the biggest differences? Now, I have to preface this by saying I don't read a lot of DC. Most of what I read is Batman-related stuff. I used to read Green Arrow and Green Lantern a little bit, but I've dropped them. I used to read Flash a little bit, but I haven't read that in a while either. So you two are bigger into DC than I am, I would say, by a big stretch. So I thought this would be a good topic for the two of you plus me, because we could have a little bit of back and forth between Marvel and DC, because I think you guys like DC a little bit better than I do, right?
Boy, that's actually getting right into the question, isn't it?
No, not necessarily.
I mean, yes, but for me it is, because the difference is not the characters or even say necessarily the writing. For me, the big difference is the editorial decisions. That's
I would agree with that, and I think a lot of times the people that Marvel fans especially that they have problems with DC, it's because they try to take the DC characters and compare them directly with the Marvel universe and try to make them make sense from a Marvel context, and that doesn't work. So,
if you want to get into it, I'll start if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
For me, the big difference isn't in the characters. I like this character more or whatever, because my two favorite heroes of all time, comic book wise, Batman's number one, and a very close second is Daredevil.
Right.
Batman's just edges him out for me, but not by much. So I have one on each side, but couple thoughts. Now, reading comic books for as long as I have, I've seen the changes. I've felt the waves of difference and arguing that people have. I remember Joe Quesada saying, I think it's on the Daredevil documentary, and the way he viewed it was kind of accurate and yet kind of insulting. He said, DC is the upper echelon. They're the, Zeus, and this is the way people should be. Whereas Marvel, and this is his quote, I think, are the cool kids. Marvel, we're hip, we're cool, we're which at the time, maybe in 1963, because they did make them more human to a point where now they're so, every character has their own problems, where that has become the Marvel, cookie cutter sort of, if you're going to create a Marvel character, he better have a crap load of baggage. Fine. I don't care about that. But that is a big difference. But biggest part for me, and I think this is why I tend to go, I'm more of a DC person than a Marvel, is the editorial decisions with DC's problem, if they're going to have one, is they may miss some opportunities story-wise. They'll make you really want something for the longest time. They did the New 52. We only recently saw Wally West. We haven't seen Cassandra Cain. They're now bringing Wonder Girl in. They made us wait. Okay. They missed some opportunities doing that, where Marvel, and Nick and I have talked about this on our podcast, Marvel tends to go, you like this? Good. Here's 5 more titles that aren't written as well, but we're going to flood the market, and then it's going to just burn itself out. And if you're lucky, one of them will stick around. Like Avengers, perfect example.
Yeah.
I pick any title, really. Avengers, good. Avengers is good. You have New Avengers. When that came out, that was good. Then you have what? Avengers World, and you have Secret Avengers, and even if the first story arc is pretty good, I don't know if they even care about having a long-term goal, because then they can just go, we're going to end it, and maybe we'll start at number 1 again. So that's, for me, if you're going to compare the two, it's not in who's cooler, Superman or Spider-Man, whatever. That's different. It's the editorial decisions that I'll have a problem with. How about you?
Cheek? Well, we'll go with Cheek next.
Yeah, so I think I would agree with all that. I think another pretty large difference, especially with since the New 52, is how dark the DC universe is compared to Marvel. DC tortures the shit out of their heroes. No one's allowed to be happy. It's lots of it goes beyond even personal sacrifice. They are brutalized. So and to Mac's point too, they DC, I think, tends to take like the almost use their heroes in the same way that the Greeks and the Romans do with the gods. They're extremely powerful beings, and they're just put through hell, and they have all these like especially Batman. They it seems like every it's a great title, but every new chapter it tends to get darker, and he goes through that much more, and in not in a like a 90s grunge type way, where it just kind of feels like dark and gritty. It's fairly heavy stuff, to varying degrees across the lines. And I think also they, I don't think they do all that well with getting past, Marvel. They can come out, and they have, with new characters, each and every decade that remain popular and are still there. I think DC struggles with that. They'll try to come out with something new, and it just doesn't have the same traction. And eventually it just, all goes back to the core Justice League members.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like they're able to kind of expand on that, in any meaningful way, which, maybe isn't a bad thing. Maybe just having a small core group of characters, in a large universe like that is something cool, because Marvel certainly goes the other direction. Just pick up a copy of X-Men or Avengers, and there's, the Avengers have 50 members. Everybody's an Avenger now, I think.
And
everybody's also, I think, an X-Men at this point.
Yeah.
So,
jumping off of what you just said, it's an issue too, because I know for a while there, Aquaman was selling really well, which is mind blowing to me. But you would rub it in my face because your favorite superhero, Cheek, that is Aquaman. I don't know if you've been trolling me for years or if that's actually true, but yeah, it's Aquaman, and that's crazy to me. But like you said, the Justice League members, most specifically Superman and Batman, are the most recognizable DC heroes. It's unlikely that you're going to get a Booster Gold or a Blue Beetle TV show or movie ever, no matter how well DC does or thinks they could do with it. They struggle with a Batman and Superman movie. Hopefully the movie is good. Whatever, that's different. That's a totally different conversation. But they have the biggest probably two biggest fictional characters maybe of all time. And that, I feel like, from my point of view, that's what carries DC, along with Justice League. The rest of those characters as well, but to a lesser degree. There was the reason I thought about this topic was because when I'm watching the movies and the shows, both from DC and Marvel, and reading the books, there was just something that was like, they're similar because they're a similar idea, obviously. A hero facing problems and struggles and obstacles and people. And I was just thinking, like, there's something different because I've been reading a lot of Batman, catching up on the history, which Mac knows. I've been reading a lot of the graphic novels. I got a lot of them for Chris and stuff, and it's been awesome. But Cheek said, that DC is darker than Marvel, and I agree with that point. But it's just by like this weird. It's like there's a line, right? There's a line, and DC will cross that line, and Marvel will like step on the line. Do you know what I mean? Like it's very, very close in the way that they handle things that happen to characters, because Marvel can do instances of brutality, like you just said. The recent Captain America run, before Steve lost his powers, and then even up and including that, there was a lot of gruesome stuff that happened to Steve along the way, without spoiling it for you guys if you ever get around to reading it. But they'll do it, but it's still just towing the line. But
yes,
Batman, like,
yes,
and then DC will chop up Kyle Rayner's girlfriend and put her in a refrigerator.
Right, and then every issue of Batman, I feel like so many. I'm flipping pages and they're like gassing people with fear gas, and they're screaming like, "I'm gonna kill you," and then they like slit people's throats and stuff. And like Marvel does that, but they like I said, they dance on the line, and DC like just they're a habitual line stepper of brutality. So that's why I was just wondering why you think that is. Is it the nature of the
I have an
characters
idea.
that they have? Or
No.
is it just like their sort of mandate as far as storytelling techniques, or what is it?
I think it's one of the things that I'm, again, hoping they're going to change with this whole reboot. Here's hoping. Marvel's safety cushion has always been they can step on that line. They're not going to cross the line, because if you cross that line, now it's harder to come back, because they always go back to the status quo.
Right.
You know, like we said, they've done great. One of my favorite stories of all time was Civil War. That was because it mattered. It shook things up. It wasn't Peter Parker living with Aunt May anymore. He was going to be on the run. And sure enough, no matter how great that was, they came right back. Whereas DC does that less. They will change stuff up. They'll, sticking in the Batman area, there's times where the commissioner isn't the commissioner anymore. Like right now, he's not the commissioner. And that will last a good long time. What, at least a year?
Yeah.
That matters. That it may eventually go back. They had him have a heart attack. He got shot. He stopped being the commissioner. They had No Man's Land. That was a year-long event. That felt different. And whether you loved it or hated it, it stuck for a while. Where Marvel, we've done time travel crap. And you think, great, things are going to change. Oh, wait, no, they're not. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And I think, just building off of that, I think the other thing is, I think the DC characters tend to be so powerful that for events to be meaningful to these characters and really drive them and give them, like Superman, for example, it's one of those things where a bad day for Superman has to be a lot worse than a bad day for Captain America.
But you know what? I don't think that applies anymore. Everybody always says, and that's always been the argument of, well, DC heroes are so powerful. Not anymore, because again, I think you were saying Marvel has so many, X-Men. Every new writer of X-Men is going to create their own character. By doing that, they have created what's his name? Sentry. Sentry. Whatever. Sentry. I liked him. But he was basically Superman. I mean, that's, Superman with psychological problems.
Yeah,
I think that I liked him,
of Sentry.
Right. Well, I don't know if I don't think Marvel's characters are weaker. I think DC's trying to make weaker characters in their, when they create something. Marvel tends to go the opposite direction, so that way they're both kind of meeting.
Yeah. I think the other thing, too, is, in context, right? If you, back to my original point, if you're a Marvel fan, you think of Superman in context to how he would relate and interact with all the Marvel characters, and in that context, he'd be incredibly overpowered, to the point of being ridiculous. But if you put him back in the DC universe, there's balance there. There's a lot more characters there with, especially, like the intergalactic piece of things. There's, like Darkseid, any number of Superman villains, would just, beat the hell out of a whole lot of Marvel, people. And I think, getting back to Mac's point, in terms of crossing the line, if you were to put any of Batman's villains in the Marvel universe, there were just, there'd be heroes like curled up in the fetal position, just at the stuff that would be happening. So, I think it gets back to, you have to think of them as separate, and you have to think of them in their own context. And if you're, in the Marvel mindset, a lot of that stuff isn't going to make sense.